So now we're going to go we're going back in time now, because what we're going to talk about now is the registration process and what are called committee allocations. So here's the way it works. When registration for a conference opens up, I usually get an email, sometimes they post something online, and they let everybody know, by the way, registration for MUN, the conference hosted by UCLA, is now open. Registration for Trojan MUN, the one hosted by USC, is now open. When registration opens, what I do is I'll fill out the registration form and indicate how many delegates we plan on bringing, and generally speaking, how many we want to be in each of the committees. Because some of the larger conferences can have 6 or 7 or 8 committees. So depending on the timing, that's what I mean by our committee allocations. And we're saying we want to be allocated this many committees, this many members and this many committees. And so, like I say, if we have a large number of newer delegates, I ask for more spots in the General Assembly committees. If we have a large number of veteran delegates, I might ask for more in the specialized, the Security Council, and the crisis committees. It just depends. Now, depending on the timing, delegates might be able to make requests for what a particular country they want to represent and which committee they want to represent, but it's not always the case. So for example, in the fall, I have to register for committees before I even know how many students are enrolled in the class. So for example, in the fall, I'll have already registered for the conference hosted by Santiago Canyon College. It's called SoCal MUN. I'll have already registered for the Trojan MUN, the one hosted by USC, even though I don't even know how many students are enrolled in the class, or if it's going to be 6 people, 20 people, or 25 people. I don't know how many delegates are going to come back in the club and want to participate but not be enrolled in the class. So I just have to fill out the registration form ahead of time. So usually I make a request, and what happens is we figure out who gets what. The way it works, just the pecking order, veterans usually get their preferences first. Although a lot of times I like the preferences to be, the experienced delegates to be in the more complicated, difficult committees. But generally speaking, I'm going to let the veteran delegates choose first. The newer delegates are usually going to participate in the GA or the specialized committees. And then every once in a while, especially when there's a veteran delegates who really want, or even newer delegates who really want to be in the same committee and they want to be the same country, one of the ones that we've been allocated, sometimes what we'll do is we'll compete for spots via speech. And so each delegate will come up and say why they should be able to represent some country in this committee. And then we'll just let the team vote who they thought did a better job. Now the truth is, I make the decision. But I value your opinion, and I like to see who does well under pressure, and probably who you think does well under pressure is probably the same person that I think does well under pressure. But sometimes that's one of the things that we do. The problem is that takes up a lot of time. We have a lot of shit to cover, and so sometimes I'll just make the decisions myself. The other thing you have to remember is that we like to have delegates in many committees to increase our chances of winning an award, right? Because if we have everybody in one committee, the thing is that they only give out a certain number of awards. So just so you know, there are basically 4 awards that are given out in each committee, 4 different kinds of awards. There's best delegate, that's obviously the best delegate. Then there's an outstanding delegate, and sometimes it'll be more than one. Then it's the honorable mention delegate. Some conferences call them distinguished delegates. And then there's something called a verbal commendation. And so those are the 4 different kinds of awards. The distribution of awards within each conference varies. So for example, in a committee that has 60 delegates, there's only going to be 1 best delegate, right? But sometimes when it comes to determining the outstanding delegate, sometimes they'll do 1, sometimes they'll do 2. We've seen this in our own committees, where there'll be 1 best delegate who just clearly was the best person, but then 2 delegates who were both awesome, both did a great job. And the only way to determine who was better would be to like flip a coin, which doesn't seem to make much sense. So sometimes what committees will do is they'll just say there's 2 outstanding delegates, right? In terms of honorable mentions, or like in one case, distinguished delegates, you can go anywhere between 2 and 4 delegates that'll get awards, and then the verbal commendations can go between 2 and 4. If we have all our delegates in one committee, all competing for the same awards and no delegates in the other committees, we're screwed. And so we want to win as many awards as we can, because at the end of the last awards given out are for the best large delegation, the school, the outstanding large delegation, schools, and then the best small delegation and the best and the most outstanding small delegation. A delegation is the whole group. And so we want to put ourselves in a position where we can win those awards. And we can't do it if we're all crammed into 1 or 2 committees. And so that's the goal. Then next I want to talk about, so we've talked about the chair, we've talked about the registration process, we've talked about the topics. Now I want to talk about the delegates' responsibilities, the expectations of the delegates. So here's the thing, and so that's what you're going to be talking about, delegates. You'll hear me talk about it in class, not students, delegates. You're part of a team. The expectation in terms of our delegates for preparing is that you're going to be knowledgeable on all of the MUN rules of procedure, and you're going to be knowledgeable about the topic as well. Right? Sometimes there are 2 topics. I'm expecting you to know them both. When you go there, your job is to represent the views of your country, or if you're playing a character, represent your character truthfully and honestly. So in the General Assembly and in the Security Council, you're always going to be representing a country. In the Security Council, you're always going to be representing a country. In specialized committees, it can go either way. Sometimes you're going to be representing a country, sometimes you're going to be representing a person, a character. Crisis committees are almost always characters. You're representing an individual. And by the way, in any of these committees, it may involve defending a country or a position that you disagree with, something that you find disgusting. If your character believes that, if your country is in favor of that, that's your job, to represent that. And I think that's a good thing. You've probably heard this before. If you can't argue the opposing side, then you really don't know your own side. So being able to successfully argue and convincingly argue a perspective that you disagree with is going to give you greater insight into the people you disagree with and greater insight into your own beliefs. Now, during the conference, what we have debates, discussions. There's informal debates that you're going to hear about, where delegates get up and they walk around and they talk about the topic with other delegates. And then there's going to be formal debate. Now, formal debate is when the rules of procedure become particularly important. Now, here's the main thing I want to get across in this video. When you are in the model United Nations, especially when you're representing a country, you never refer to yourself as me or I. You never use personal pronouns. If you're representing the country of Cameroon, you're going to get up and you're going to say, Cameroon believes that it's very important to do this, blah, 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 whatever it happens to be, right? What you're not going to say is, I believe it's really important that we do this. Nobody cares what you believe, right? You're Cameroon. You're playing a character. You're in this case, a country. You left whomever you are, you left you at the door. As soon as you walked in, you were Cameroon. Here's what you do. If somebody's made another proposal, you stand up and you say, Cameroon supports this proposal. That's it. You don't stand up and say, I support this proposal, because nobody cares what you think. You're not there. It's like you're a character on a stage, right? You're playing a character. So sometimes you're playing a character, you might be a bad guy, right? You play the bad guy. That's the way it works. Now here's the thing. It's a really hard habit to break. I mean, we're used to saying I, we're used to saying me. That's typical. And so we have a number of strategies that we use in class during what we call our simulations to help break you of that habit. What you'll see at the beginning of most semesters is that new delegates have a lot of trouble doing this. Experienced delegates at the beginning of the semester, they slip up as well. Okay. Then last thing, really quickly. Most of what you're going to do at Model United Nations conferences is negotiate. You're negotiating with other countries because you're trying to get come up with a solution to whatever problem you're dealing with. For our college, our program, you must be diplomatic at all times. We have this saying, we're COC nice, and we take pride in that. There are other colleges that teach their delegates to be assholes. No other way to put it. They teach them to be underhanded, to say mean things, to do crappy stuff. That is not who we are. And that's not always easy, because sometimes when somebody's being a dick, even if you're just playing a game at this conference, it's still hard not to just go, what the hell is your problem? It's hard not to get upset. But that's another skill that you're learning in this program, is how to stay calm during times when your emotions are stirred up. And that's a skill you're going to take everywhere you go. Because remember, the goal is to come up with a solution to whatever problem your committee is taking under consideration. And as long as you are always moving the committee forward, moving them closer to what the goal is supposed to be, and you're doing it in a diplomatic way, you're being COC nice, you're going to do well in the Model United Nations and elsewhere.